Well, hey, welcome, folks. This is Vin Zeeland, and I am the founder of the Culture Strategy. Today, I have an awesome guest from Omaha, Nebraska. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All
Omaha,
right.
Nebraska, right in the middle.
Trevor Schade is a culture strategist. He is a real estate leader. And we're going to talk today about the importance of culture. The reason why I took interest in Trevor's work is because he founded and built a business on culture, not on operations, not on processes and procedures, though he does utilize that. He built a business on culture. So, Trevor, I want to welcome you to the Culture Strategy. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. I really appreciate you inviting me on. Looking forward to it, having some fun today. And yeah, it'll be a good time. I'm excited to see what kind of dynamics we bounce off of one another. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, awesome. So you're a fellow ENFJ. You're like a assessment taker,
Yes.
and that cracked me up when we were texting back and forth, and you're just like, yeah, I have all kinds of assessments I could send to you, but there's two of them that I love. I love to use the Gallup Clifton Strengths, the Strength Finder. But I also love to use the Myers-Briggs. Just gives me a little bit of understanding of the inside of the person. And so I feel like I understand you fairly well. Pretty awesome. You have some great strengths. Why don't you go ahead and begin there? Why did you choose to use Gallup, first of all?
Sure. Yeah, I felt like my early 20s, I was starting companies, and honestly, about everything I touched in my 20s failed. But while in that, I dove into some low-grade, lightweight psychology books and a lot of more of these different kind of personality temperaments and gifts and strengths and things like that. As I went down, and a lot of companies try to build a culture on the quadrant style, anything that has the four, the Myers-Briggs and DISC and several others, and I think they're great. And I think there's a huge advantage to being able to teach your entire culture only four. And that's all anyone has to know to be able to kind of find some kind of footing to sort of relate. Now, what I liked about Gallup and their strength system was, I mean, it was in the 30s, right? The number of strengths, and they've added maybe one or two over the decades. And it had a different spin on it. It was all about, if you could figure out how to look at your top five strengths and live and breathe those in your leisure, in your relationship with a partner, your relationship with your kids, in your job, if you could just live and breathe just your strengths, you would, at the end of the day, be more rested and more energized than you were when you woke up that morning. And I thought, well, that's just a better way to live. And who wouldn't want to feel, even if they didn't know that that's what was causing it, they would now get to live and experience that on a daily basis. I just love the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was doing the same thing. I went through my undergrad in psychology, and I noticed that there was all this, especially in the mental health field, right? In that sphere of what's wrong with you. It's always, let's find what's wrong with you. But I really resonated with the idea of, hey, what's right with you? What's good about you? Where's your superpower? Right?
Yeah. I totally agree. And when I was 8 years old, my sister Brandy Schade runs she now runs Strengthsology Insights. Which is a Gallup Strengths infused company and utilizes all of that. She used to call, I was 8 years old, and I think that was the first time she called me ambitiously lazy. She said, you will outwork anyone so that you don't have to work. And then I learned things about like Smarter, Not Harder, and all of these Lean Six Sigma different programs that are actually talking about the 80-20 rule and all of this. And I'm like, I was just ahead of my time. That's all. I was 8 years old and I had it. I had it. And now I've got the terms that go with it to justify my actions. But that was one of the things that I saw that Gallup was really doing, is if you could take somebody's nature and have them operate in something that is so just part of their identity, something that is so innate to their subconscious that they don't know how they do it. They couldn't teach it if they tried.
Right.
And if they just were involved in only that, they're going to outperform anyone trying to compete with them, getting a job against them, or just being creative and creating something that's actually engaging or inspiring to others. No one can touch and compete with somebody that's born with that natural ability. And they could go work their guts out on their bottom 5 strength stuffs, and they're going to be daunted on the front end and exhausted on the back end.
Right.
Or they could just operate in that space, and then someone else could operate in their strengths, and all of a sudden you could piece it together, and everybody's just at, I mean, outrageous output, and they don't even feel like they're at outrageous output.
Yeah. So with that, we had a conversation. Brandy introduced me to you. Love Brandy. You have an amazing sister. She has an amazing product,
Yep.
great service, just really a dynamic person. She's actually a guest on this program. Have been on her show a few times, just watching and observing, but I've also been interviewed by her. She's just really fascinating as a someone who is mathematically inclined and is somehow ended up in this sphere. So my understanding is you introduced that to her, but I wanted to talk with you about your business, because most businesses begin and start on, oh my gosh, we've got to get our numbers, our KPIs. We've got to have a spreadsheet, and we've got to have this and that. We got to meet all these metrics.
Yeah.
But you took a different route. And let's talk about the difference between a culture strengths-based company versus an operational minded and mindset company that's using those KPIs and metrics.
Sure. Yeah. So my background, I've been writing computer code since I was in 5th grade. So I was a very linear thinker, and I was very data oriented myself. That turned into getting a Lean Six Sigma black belt certification, and I started doing statistical analytics, and I started doing operations consultations and talking about when will your ROI be experienced, and many other terms that are way too long, and I didn't even fit into saying them. And I got to visit all these dashboards, and I got to see all these KPIs, and I got to hear all of these management teams talk about what they then would do with their KPIs. And it was interesting. My role started becoming eliminating people's KPIs because they were mostly neat. And I don't do neat. If something is neat, and that's the end of it, there's no action. So why look at it? Why learn? Why observe? And so the KPIs were interesting to me, and I can do the big data, but what I watched was I saw people in the workplaces at these companies doing the same thing that I'd found myself do a couple of times in high school and college. I think we've all had, I mean, have you had a project when you were in high school, college that you just got strangely neurotic about, and you were up till 3 a.m, overproducing more than what the was required? Have you had a project like that?
Yeah.
Right?
Of course. I'm working on, I'm just about at the tail end of my master's degree. And I have learned not to be neurotic about projects. It's just do what is stated, what is asked of you, what's in the rubric. And don't worry about it.
It really is. It's even, in fact, it's part of lean, and one of the 9 kinds of waste that you eliminate. It's the overproducing. If someone can only recognize this, well, sure, produce 1 notch above, but don't produce what you're capable of. Just exceed and call it a day and move on to something else, and that's more productive. So yes, right on. So we've all had those projects. We've all had those moments. And I started turning that neuroses into defining it as being inspired. You know, let's say it is truly a worthwhile use of time, and it is something that somebody really wants to produce. Well, I saw, you know, if I just figured out how other people were inspired, and I created an opportunity that they could choose to step into that or not, I could use their strengths to create an atmosphere of the work that needs done is their love and their passion and their nature. And they became inspired every single time. They would beyond outproduce any KPI expectation I could put on them. And so I realized I have some reports and I glance at them just to keep a beat on the business and make sure I know where we're at and do I need to adjust anything at a very high level. But when it comes to holding people accountable, I really am just measuring their engagement, and their engagement translates into how inspired are they, and that translates into how productive are they. And so I feel like the culture needs some KPIs, but I don't know that I necessarily talk about but maybe 4 of them with anyone else. Everything else is just for my own top level view.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're an entrepreneur. You started a real estate company. How long ago did you start that company?
I started the company 9 years ago, but I didn't bring anyone on with me until about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Just over about 5.5. Yeah.
All right. So statistically, it's about 5 years, about 80%. We're going to just make it a nice round number. 80% of all new business startups fail.
Yep.
And usually there are people who come in, they churn and they burn and they go. And we call that in the business world attrition, right?
Yes.
A lot of startup companies have high attrition. I call it toxicity. It's a toxic culture.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with you and I was just blown away to hear you talk about how you started at 0 people. It was just you.
Yep.
And then you brought on how many agents?
It was about 26 in the first 5 years.
Wow. 26. And how many of those people have stayed with you?
In the first 5 years, we had 0 attrition. Shortly after, there was a group of them that stepped out and started their own team, and they wanted to work on their own processes and they wanted to have their own flavor. Yeah. But in 5 years, we never had a single person leave in any capacity, and everybody just got to thrive.
That's awesome.
And in the real estate agent and agent team, agent brokerage specifically, I think that's incredibly rare. If anybody listening to the show is in real estate, they've probably seen tons of people switch teams, switch brokerages about every 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. If somebody's not hitting their goals, they really start looking for something else and another place to go.
Yeah.
And I really built our culture thinking about what would it have taken to keep me as part of a real estate team. And I needed no ceilings, and I needed freedom, but I needed support. I needed the things handled that were administrative. And that was it. I just started building that team and creating a belonging that everybody knew that their style, their gifts, their strengths fit. Yeah. And then they just had to learn how.
Right. So do you use what tools do you use to help your team congeal, to grow together, to be the outperforming and outstanding, but not overworked? Tell us about your team and how you brought that together. That, to me, that's fascinating.
Yeah. I think I took the time to build a relationship with them. And you hear people say that sometimes, but I mean, I would call them up on a random Wednesday and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you want to grab a beer? And I would actually go hang out with them. And it could be 15 minutes. It didn't matter, but it didn't have a business purpose. It just had to be a genuine connection. And I shared about me, and they shared about them. And it was just, I'd talk about it didn't have to get all deep and I didn't get all kumbaya and start up a bonfire every time, just some of the times. But we got together and we would talk about, what's happening in your life? What's going on? How's business? Cool. How are the kids? One of the things I learned in How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, forever ago,
Yeah.
I think it's chapter 2. It was take a genuine interest in other people. And I hated that word genuine. First time I read it, I was like, oh, for the love, can't I just fake having an interest in people? And that's not what the book said. And that is not how it works. You actually have to change your heart and engage. And so I did that. That on a one-on-one level, let everybody feel that there was at least a connection they could latch onto. Now you asked about what tools. So honestly, I looked at different messaging apps and Slack, and I think GroupMe was another one, and WhatsApp ended up being the one I chose because it was the most approachable in feel. It's really against my techie side. I like Slack. I like these things that I can automate into.
Sure.
But the feel became a group chat. And so I would have an agents channel and I would have an entire company channel. And then we would have different events and I might start another channel for that. I tried to balance it, but having that channel then let everybody say congratulations on different sales and celebrate success together.
Okay.
I also watched that I'm not necessarily a competitive person. I like to do well. I like to be in the top percents, but I really just like to run my race and enjoy and have some folks run as peers with me, and we get to share our stories and learn from each other. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But even not necessarily being that competitive person, I was part of a real estate team and they had a dashboard on the TV in the office and it showed these cool little dials and these number of transactions. And I noticed I was even looking at myself and I was looking at the person behind me and the person in front of me. And I was going, ooh, if I just made one more sale, I'd jump past them. Even not being competitive, I was watching this. I couldn't believe it. And so I did use a program and a system called Gecko Board.
Yeah.
And we have about 3 or 4 of these dashboards now that are just on in the office all the time.
Yeah.
And everybody can see where they're at. And only so many fit on the top row. So it's funny. One of the things that came out of the culture organically is people will now kind of chant and cheer and they'll be like, ooh, I want top row, top row, top row. And it became this label to be top row.
Top row. That's awesome. You just couldn't help yourself, even though you're not competitive. You just had to go for it. And that's really cool. I really like that approach. That's the whole point of this. Because over the years, I have recognized, I've worked in small businesses where I was a manager, a supervisor, and then I went into corporate training. A lot of my years spent developing leaders in different ways and in different industries, construction, religion. I was a pastor for 20 years. But I'll tell you, culture was something that just kept popping up over and over and over again, listening to people talk about, man, I got to go to work today. I've got to go to work. It's that Sunday dread. That Loverboy song, everybody's working for the weekend kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think, we still work for the weekend, but I remember never really feeling that way about getting up on Monday morning and going, man, I'm excited about going to work. Knowing it's that ecosystem of self. And I just remember walking into, so I worked in real estate. So this is fun, but I remember walking in and the president walking up to me and saying, "You're a woo guy."
Yeah.
And I smiled and I said, "Oh, you've been reading Strength Finders." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Thanks for opening my eyes to that."
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Once you start seeing it in other people, then you can find that common ground, right? And do life together and have a good conversation.
Yep. Yeah. Anytime someone joins the team, part of the onboarding process, I give them a Gallup Strengths book. We actually have a projector that has the person's face and their 5 strengths in this big colorful picture.
Okay.
Scrolling through each of the people all day, every day on this huge wall. The idea was to get the projector so we could hook up an Oculus to and have 3D games in the office and whatnot. But while no one's playing, why not have everybody's strengths roll? Well, when I came across, there's another sub book that is called Strengths-Based Selling. I give everybody a copy of this so that I buy them a code, they get their 5 strengths, and then they read this book about how do your strengths fit into selling. I'm going to call it connecting with people, because we teach, if you'll just connect with people, help them with any issues and problems they have, well, then a transaction occurs. And I just kind of take the selling part out of it, because I think the skill is not necessary if you just help people instead. And so they get the strengths-based selling book, and they get to be liberated all of a sudden. One, they get to be told, no, as you are in your 5 strengths, like you are right. You're okay. You don't need to fix and change and work on these other things. If you do, okay.
Sure.
But so they get liberation 1, and then number 2, this is how your strengths connect you with other people. This is how you can actually help guide and lead people through something they're pleading and hoping will show up in their life. And your strengths actually work for that. And here's how. And they get liberation number 2.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when it came to your business and you decided to begin with culture, and now you've walked us through that, go a little bit deeper in defining what the outcome was for your business.
Sure. Yeah. I'll tell you also kind of the front end of that. I thought about this from a very numbers standpoint. I told you about the productivity and what follows inspiration, but I also just looked at expenses in general. And most businesses, I mean, their number 1 expense is taxes. Number 2 is then employees. Well, if number 2 is employees and staff and salaries and things like that, that said to me that the cost of turnover was ridiculously expensive in comparison to so many other things. And I thought, if I got that part right, how many other mistakes do I now have the buffer to be able to make in what I spend on marketing and anything of that nature? And so my goal was really, how do I train somebody once and never have to replace them? And that was the businessy side of taking the business from a place of terror and scared and startup into, all right, this at least makes sense numerically also, because I really am attacking the big chunk and protecting against that monster. And then to answer your question, the data and the stats, to give you so me personally as a real estate agent, so in our market, maybe an average sale price of a house is around 240,000, 250,000.
Right.
And I personally, when I was running as an agent, not running the company, I think I sold upwards of 40 houses a year, and maybe 6 or 7 million in total sales volume.
Wow.
And bringing on the agents and letting them honestly engage at whatever level they're engaged in, they could now see the path of hanging on to a full-time or part-time job and buffering that risk of their own to start getting their first 3 or 4 sales ramped up while they then converted their whole life. They didn't have to be the sharp risk of having 6 months in savings and start a new venture and hope. Now, I like the fire that does set under someone, because you back somebody into a corner, they often fight out of it.
Sure.
But there is another option for less risk comfortable folks. They all have a method. And so
risk averse.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm like, risk, I don't know. It's all about mitigating. If it's mitigated, then it's not even risk. And I don't know. Maybe that's another way of justifying my design. And so the team, as they grew to 26 agents, some of them would engage more. And then the next year we had some agents and a family member went into hospice and they disengaged. Somebody had a baby and they disengaged, but they're still part of the team and they're still producing a few sales here and there when it worked for them. And they knew that they had a place that they could belong. And that's not able to be done quite as fluidly in every company. I'm very well aware. When you've got salaries on the line and you've got benefits on the line, I get it. But there's definitely a way to create the culture that at least helps uptick that engagement.
Yeah.
and so then every year we've grown, and I think we've increased by somewhere between 46 and 56% every year over
Wow.
year
Wow.
in growth. And
Wow.
it's been a wild ride, and it took a lot of technology to hang on to that pace and that growth.
Yeah.
And certainly I don't know that I believe that that's sustainable, because obviously as you get bigger, the percentage jump is a whole lot more. Like, I get
Right.
math. And
Yeah.
so I don't expect for that to continue indefinitely, but I'll take it in the first 5 years.
Oh yeah, for sure. That, to me, that's just speaks of the quality, the added value that you bring to your team, and then they reciprocate, right? So the conversation that you and I had on the phone talking about that was, or a Zoom call, I guess we had, was that they're loyal to you. And how does that play out? They're loyal to you. How does that translate into not only your business, but also in your personal life? Because I mean, I know that I've had bosses and managers and other leaders. I have
Mhm.
never really spent an ounce of time with them. I can count on one hand two
Mhm.
great managers that I absolutely loved and would invite them over for a barbecue.
Yeah.
But how
Yeah.
does that translate for you in what you've done?
Yeah. It's incredibly humbling to not even consider that, not even realize that, not even think of it, and then to learn of it later that someone they're sold out to me personally. It's it really took me some time to get settled with that, because it wasn't even a thought, total byproduct.
Right.
And so it's humbling, because I feel like it's somebody honestly letting me in and inviting me into their personal space and their personal world and their family stuff that's going on, when we could just sell houses. And um and then I've been told that it's intriguing to watch from the outside, because there's blurred gray lines as to, am I working or am I playing? Are we getting together because we're having a meeting, or is it because we have three kinds of beer on tap in the office? And there's there's a lot of gray lines of this. And so I was even told, so we do a couple incentives and incentive trips and get-togethers and whatnot. And in the way I speak, I don't notice it, but I've been told I always include the spouses. Every time I talk about getting together, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, are you and your spouse are able to join us? And it's just second nature. I just expect this to be, we all hang out. And I forget that you go to most companies and most atmospheres, and it's the staff member, the employee, and then maybe there's one event a year that you get to invite a plus one. And I'm like, hey, we're having a barbecue in the backyard. Who else coming? Are you able to bring your kids? I just sent a message out literally yesterday. That was a state park get together,
Oh,
and it's got bounce houses, kids, all this stuff. It's being sponsored by one of the local association of realtors. And I just posted it out there. I don't even know if my calendar's free to go, but I just threw it in our WhatsApp channel, and I said, anybody feel like doing this? And I had someone speak up and say, yep, I'm taking my youngest. Yep, I was already planning on going. Yep, I could even grab my grandson. And
wow.
they're doing things together. I think that honestly came from, I'll tell you, the number one accidental right thing that I think I've ever done. Whole life, everything, maybe. This is a big one, because it's hard for me to choose favorites. That's just unconditional, right? So I launched the team as a sub team
Okay.
in September of 2017, and in February of 18, we broke away officially, and we were full standalone, full risk, full all our own bills, all that stuff. So 2018, I am absolutely manic, and all weekend long. I mean, I remember I would sit from Friday at 3 until Sunday at 1 a.m. And
Okay.
I would sit on my couch in a nasty t-shirt and a pair of gym shorts, and I would write all these different scripts and all these different automations. And I'd be in Zapier like a crazy person and getting our CRM up and running and all this workflows and all this. Ooh, which lenders am I going to talk to and build affiliations with? And oh, how do I build a marketing company that then supports all of this? And I would just be this crazy person every single day, day in, day out. And I was building these processes. Always my priority litmus test was what puts money in the pockets of the agents. And that's how I decided my priority list. Because I had 100 projects. I think it was 17 major projects, and those took me 5 years to accomplish those 17.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see through what should I work on first. And I thought, if my real goal is to never have to retrain a person, then how about everything I build always puts money in their pocket or makes them more fulfilled or gives them something legit? And I would know that I need something and I'll squeeze it in.
Yeah.
But the priority was always theirs. So we get through 2018, and I had told them what I wanted to do was this incentive trip. And whatever percent of their sales goal that they achieve, I would pay that percent of their team trip. And we would go on a team trip together.
Wow.
And we got to the end of 2018. And I was at about a minus $108,000 net worth. And I had every credit card maxed out. And I had no idea how we were going to pull off the next move and phase and survive. It was actually the third week of February of 2019. I remember it very well.
Which would have been a slow month, right?
Yes, that's going into the winter. So then we're also it's coming out of the slow, in fact, and nothing's ramping up yet. Yeah. So yeah. I told everyone, I said, hey, I don't think, I said, I appreciate you sticking with me. This year was creative, and I'm going to tweak the incentive, and I am going to pay 100% of all of your team trips, because I think you would have achieved your sales goals had you had the systems that I wanted to be able to provide you. And I wasn't able to get them in place. So I'm going to carry that load. And we went to Cancun, Mexico, or Playa del Carmen, and all-inclusive resort, their airfare, their catamaran day, their transportation, and their flights were all covered. And I didn't understand that that was going to be the absolute pivotal backbone of everything that we became. And everybody got to play. Everybody got to be in the sun, ride a catamaran around the ocean with their spouses. Oh. They did pay for their spouses. Let's clarify that. I paid for them, and they could chip in and bring their plus one. Like, right. You know, I had my limits. Sure. And that gelled all of us, because now we had an adventure that we could refer back to. We could talk about. Now we even have a TV in the office that scrolls pictures of the team doing fun stuff, is what we call, like, and we have this Google Drive, and we pour pictures into it, and it constantly just cycles through all of the local charity events we've done, all of the client appreciation parties, all the trips we've gone on, all the axe throwing that we've gone and done, like anything that we've done together that was fun or cool, we now just reflect on. And that one trip really glued the team. The relationships got built at a deeper level. And then it just turned into being able to stack more on top.
Yeah. So that brings up a good point. A lot of companies, you know, we hear about, you know, companies like Google, for instance, you know, and other, you know, progressive type companies that, you know, have pool tables or ping pong tables and cool couches and coffees and, you know, whatnot. They all, you know, will say, yeah, this is, you know, how we built our culture. But to me, just listening to what you described there, you're not just doing life at work, you're doing life outside of work. You're saying, let's just take a break from this. Let's get together. Let's enjoy life. Most leaders, and I know this for a fact, I've watched it over the years. Most leaders would not take on that kind of liability. There are very few that would say, yeah, I'm going to take you. And if you want to invite your plus one, your family, we'll go down to Mexico. Like that's really rare. And so folks, I wanted to point out in this first session I have a point about all of this, about building your business. Even if you're someone who's started a business or you're a big corporation, there's a paradigm shift. There is a different way of viewing the world. And it doesn't matter what your strengths are. You could be, some high level minded person who's just strictly about KPIs and metrics. But if just one little shift, if that one little shift could bring you 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% increase, why would I liken it to, Trevor, tell me if I'm wrong, why would you leave money on the table? Because I know I've talked with CEOs. I've had texting back and forth and emails. And I created a video, and I had one CEO that I shared it with, and he wrote me back and he said, on your show, talk about culture because it's so nebulous to guys like me, to, leaders. Tell me what kind of just one piece of advice for those leaders who they know it's the right thing to do. They don't want to do attrition. People hate layoffs. Some companies do it because they're lazy.
Yeah.
That's the truth. I've had guests on who've said, I watched other managers it was easy to straighten out the budget by laying people off.
Right.
Tell the audience here, just give them one piece of insight, not advice. I don't think advice is, but a piece of insight, something that will help them change their culture. They know that things are wrong. There's something off. What would you tell them?
Yeah. I think for me, the reason that I chose to build culture and belonging before productivity was because I think long term. I think it can be boiled down to that. So if I'm talking to an incredibly business minded person, somebody running a company, the short play is productivity. You pay this month's bills because you produce sales.
Yeah.
But the mental shift of what can be created and what you can have long term if you produce a machine, that is a completely different set of options. It's a completely different way of thinking. It's not necessarily the easy road. I mean, I told you the state I was in when I made the decision to take everyone on a trip and pay for the whole thing.
Yeah.
I increased my risk and I increased my liability and my buy-in and my commitment. And I don't know that I would recommend somebody do the same quite to that extent. I think there's other ways that are maybe a little more balanced, a little softer approach. But
we're going to Whataburger this weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Gosh, it was ridiculous. But I would say that to somebody that's got that business mind, that business savvy, that numbers approach, that's fine. And that works. And there's a ton of benefit there. I'm a numbers guy. Statistical analytics. But if someone wants to give themselves more options long-term, then this is how I believe it's obtainable. I think if I would have built it the other way, I would have always had to be the manager, be the company runner, be the mentor, be the everything for everyone forever, because I would have been the one driving the productivity. And instead, if I created a machine that didn't require me because the machine was inspired and the machine was self-driven and it was internally powered, It's harder. It was a longer path, kinda. But the number of options that open up because of that culture creation, night and day, absolutely night and day. I couldn't have pictured the number of options I would have
Yeah.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now having come on the other side of at least the first 5 years.
Yeah. So one of the things that I believe, my philosophy is, I'm turning a corner in leadership. I mean, of course, be a leader. There is a fine line between being a manager and being a leader,
Yeah.
right? It's a fine line. Be the leader.
Yeah.
Even if you're a
Yeah.
manager, be the leader,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
agree.
and there's a definition. I mean, I can manage numbers. I can manage Excel spreadsheets and KPIs, but I will tell you, knowing the numbers, the statistics that Gallup has put out, people are miserable out there. They are miserable. And so my philosophy is, Trevor, 8.9 million managers. I'd like to replace the 120,000 psychologists and psychiatrists out there with 8.9 million coaches and leaders,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that we don't have to use a mental health system, or at least sparingly.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Sparingly when needed. Yeah. I've said that for years. It's probably been 15 or 20 years that I have said I'm actually not a very good manager. I even used to say I'm a bad manager, and then I learned, how to speak a little better. And I'm okay. Like I can manage, but I lead is what I do.
Yeah.
I coach, I guide, I lift up, I develop. I'll do all those things, but manage, I don't want to create myself another job.
Right.
I would rather jump in the mess, honestly, lead from behind. I'm the one that typically will make sure that I'm always carrying the heaviest load, so that if anyone's got guff and gripe, they kind of keep it to themselves because they know I'm carrying a heavier load than they are. And that's where one of those comments came from about the being sold out and loyal to me personally, came from, is one of those instances where I was carrying the heaviest load, and how they just didn't want me to be carrying the heaviest load. They wanted for them to carry the heavier load because they didn't want me. They were like defending me against me. It was interesting.
That's incredible. Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So folks,
yeah, it's humbling.
Well, Trevor, first of all, thank you so much for joining me on the culture strategy. You and your sister are just dynamic folk. Really just love the conversation. And in the future, this is the first podcast that we're going to release. I went through the list of guests and I decided that you were going to be the first one to launch.
All right.
And the reason why is because you actually built, and Brandy did too. But as Brandy and I we talked about it and I thought it through, I wanted to make sure that the messaging, that leaders, I mean, real estate's a difficult, especially right now, real estate is really difficult. Having come out of real estate, taking this new adventure as a consultant, I wanted to bring on somebody who's in that realm. One of the hardest industries to work in, one of the hardest industries to hold on to people. The turn and the churn in real estate is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But this will translate into, this messaging here will translate to any business, whether it's technology, and you're a technology guy. It will translate into factory work, and another churn and burn is sales and construction. All those industries out there, the backbone, even coffee shops, right? You could be any business owner out there. And the reality is we have Trevor Schade right now in the house telling us how he built a business. And it sounds so simple. It sounds Well, relationships, how is that going to stop the bleeding? My company, we just had to let go of 10,000 people. How do we have 10,000 relationships? Well, you start from the top and you bring it down you filter that down through your people, and you send a strong message. This is how we're going to live out our mission, our vision, and our values. And we're going to do this so that we don't have to see families suffer through unemployment and years of drought. Working with each other and helping each other, building up and, doing life together. It sounds so, easy, but you said it, it's a hard road. It's difficult. It's the path that most people don't take. And yet it's the path that worked for you. It can be done in all different ways, but I really appreciate you coming here and sharing, being vulnerable, and telling us how you did it. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. I appreciate having me in the show. I'm happy to share and help in any way, anytime. And
absolutely,
if I come down to town, maybe we can jam again.
Let's do it. Look, for sure. We'll sit in the studio in person next time. And so this first season is all about the 7 pillars of culture. The next season, season 2, it's already planned, is the 5 pillars of leadership. And so I would love to bring you in, sit down face to face, and let's talk about leadership and what that means and the difference. And I know we kind of touched on it on a high level today, but we could go a little bit deeper next time. And I would love to have you down. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, folks. This is Vin Zeeland. My guest, Trevor Schade. He's a real estate guru who's done a lot of cool things with culture and built a dynamic business. And maybe next time we can get into your app that you're building.
Yeah, the app. I've got 2 or 3 of them. One of them's in the investing sector of real estate too. So there's a lot more we could cover.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Trevor. This is Vin Zeeland. We're signing off from the Culture Strategy. Have yourself a great day.
Welcome to Threadpool. We're an all-inclusive podcast factory. Podcast made easy. We operate with a done-for-you approach. If you have a great podcast concept, we can help make it a reality. In less than 8 weeks, we can have your amazing podcast fully produced, making you ready to share your podcast worldwide on all of the major podcast streaming platforms. Book a coaching session to see how we can work with you. We are Threadpool, revealing greatness.